Welcome to Ballet Bites, your daily 10-minute deep dives podcast. Today, we're diving deep into the state of ballet diversity and equity in the industry. So, big news. Pacific Northwest Ballet now has 20% of its dancers identifying as Black, which is, pretty groundbreaking given the usual single-digit averages.
Yep, yeah, that's incredible. But when you zoom out a bit, only around 6.7% of dancers in top budget companies are Black, right?
Exactly. It's like we've got some progress, but the glass ceiling at the top still hasn't really cracked open. You know, it makes you wonder whether increased representation in the core will eventually mirror in principal roles, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and that's where things get really interesting. I mean, take Misty Copeland, for instance. She's been a trailblazer as the first Black female principal at ABT, but with her retirement this October, their roster will drop back to 0 Black women principals.
Right. Yeah, and leaders in the ballet world are optimistic about the next generation, but the pipelines appear to taper off. According to the Dance Data Project's 2024 leadership report, barely 22% of the largest U.S. companies are led by women. And racial data is so scarce, they aren't even breaking it out.
And it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet, is it? There's also positive news on that front. Look at how Pacific Northwest Ballet recently promoted dancer-choreographer Keon Ross to Associate Artistic Director, shaking up the traditional hierarchy.
Right, which gives dancers of color more influence in casting and repertoire choices. It's like for the first time, the power is starting to shift a little, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So let's get into question 2. Can mentorship-plus-money programs actually bulldoze these pipeline barriers?
Well, American Ballet Theater's Project Plié has been around for a decade, doling out full scholarships that cover training, shoes, even travel.
Yep.
But critics point out that it still only feeds, fewer than 50 students a year into those top schools.
That's like dropping a tiny bucket into an ocean of need. Meanwhile, Ballet Austin's community scholarships now waive all tuition through high school, and Boston Ballet rolled out need-based stipends for skin tone tights and Pointe shoes. There's a trend here toward more holistic aid rather than just one-off grants.
Yeah, it's an important shift. Money certainly helps get kids in the door, but they also need year-round mentorship, local studio access, and supportive environments where parents aren't stretched too thin by work demands.
For sure, absolutely. And that brings us to our third burning question. Will full transparency become the norm in the ballet world? Or is it just going to be another marketing soundbite?
Right, transparency is key here. Cascade PBS, for instance, has tallied BIPOC percentages: 26% at New York City Ballet, 35% at Boston Ballet, and over 30% at San Francisco Ballet. But here's the kicker. Only 3 companies actually publish a full racial breakdown by rank.
Yeah, that's a real issue. Exactly. Advocates are pushing for annual demographic dashboards, blind resume rounds, and even video-first auditions so that skin color isn't the primary filter. Some regional troupes are even piloting these sort of screen-shielded first rounds like what orchestras have tried, but the big names haven't really taken the bait yet.
True, and without that consistent transparency, progress can stall the moment a dedicated diversity officer leaves. Data really is what keeps everyone accountable, you know?
Yep, absolutely. Now switching gears to our final big question. Could tech innovations push equity faster than traditional policy changes?
Oh man, this is where things get really futuristic. Imagine 3D printed Pointe shoes from Actable that promise, 5 times the durability and come in customizable shades. That means dancers can have shoes that perfectly match their skin tone and last longer, saving. One pro estimates around $1,200 a season.
Right, that's mind-blowing. And it's not just about shoes. We're talking about virtual reality masterclasses that beam top teachers right into community centers. That kind of technology is beginning to change the access game. Like, it literally levels the playing field for dancers who might otherwise never have the chance to work with the industry's best.
Yeah, it chips away at that entrenched pay-to-play ceiling. But, I will say, tech isn't a magic bullet. It won't fix bias overnight. It's more about gradually shifting the landscape in combination with other measures.
True. So overall, the core is diversifying, but leadership is still a tough nut to crack. Do you think transparency and tech could be the twin engines to lock in progress, if companies let them rev up, that is?
Absolutely, they're like two sides of the same coin. With heightened transparency, you keep the spotlight trained on progress and pitfalls. And tech, well, it's like a turbo boost for equity, provided it doesn't become just another gimmick.
Yeah.
But it's all about genuine change.
I do have a small critique, though. Sometimes the focus on tech can overshadow the deeply rooted issues of cultural bias and systemic barriers that money and mentorship programs also need to tackle. Don't you think?
Sure, I get that point. It's like, you can have amazing tech, but without the foundational support, like consistent mentorship and truly accessible local studios, the tech benefits might not fully reach those who need them most. It's a multi-layered challenge.
True. And that really circles back to our earlier topics about pipelines. The industry needs to not only bring diverse voices in, but ensure that those voices have a clear path upward into leadership and principal roles.
Exactly, and that's where initiatives like Project Plié or Ballet Austin's community scholarships are crucial. They might be small in scale right now, but they represent a commitment to a long-term transformation in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And while some might say these programs are only drop-in-the-bucket efforts right now, they're as important as any push for policy reform. Every little bit helps, eh?
Definitely. When you combine grassroots initiatives with high-level transparency and new technologies, you create a multi-pronged strategy that can really drive change.
Right. And what strikes me most is how these discussions are sparking real conversation in the ballet world. I mean, with Pacific Northwest Ballet hitting that 20% mark, no one can just shrug and say, it's impossible.
Exactly. It's like setting a benchmark, a tangible, measurable one. It forces everyone to examine their own practices and commitments.
Yep, but still, leadership remains the next frontier. How can companies ensure that this progress isn't just stagnant at the core level?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Sometimes it seems like the leadership pipelines are almost invisible, without adequate mentorship, exposure, and platforms for diverse talent to shine. We need more initiatives where talent is not just recognized, but also nurtured into roles that have real decision-making power.
And what do you think about the call for blind resume rounds and video-first auditions? Do you see that catching on widely?
It's promising, but there's some resistance. While regional companies are dabbling in these methods, screen-shielded rounds as they call it, the major companies haven't fully bought in yet. It might be partly due to inertia, or maybe the challenge of overhauling an entire casting process.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I guess change in such established institutions always takes a bit longer. But these kinds of systemic reforms, alongside the tech innovations we talked about, might just be the pushing forces the industry needs, if done holistically.
Absolutely. It's a balancing act. And while the numbers and tech are exciting, we have to remember the human side of it all, the dedication of young dancers, the passion in local studios, and the need for everyday mentorship beyond flashy innovations.
Totally agree. It's interesting to see that while we've got these high-profile changes at the style and policy level, the day-to-day realities remain deeply personal. That's why it's so crucial for both industry leaders and grassroots performers to talk openly about these issues.
Yeah, and the conversation here really underscores that the ballet world is at a crossroads. Diversity has clearly moved beyond a buzzword. It's now a measurable, real factor in how companies operate.
Exactly. And the challenge is to ensure that progress in representation, access, and transparency goes hand in hand with creating leaders from these diverse ranks. It's a long road ahead, but the benchmarks we're starting to see could well be the tipping point for deeper systemic change.
Absolutely. With initiatives like 3D printed Pointe shoes and VR masterclasses stirring the pot, combined with new mentorship programs, the future might just be a blend of tradition and innovation.
Yeah, that's the dream. So, as the ballet world continues to evolve, pushing against obstacles both traditional and technological. It's up to everyone involved to keep the momentum alive. Whether it's through transparent data, tech advances, or grassroots mentorship, the stage is set for real change.
Yep, and with benchmarks like PNB's impressive 20%, the message is loud and clear. Progress is not only possible, it's happening slowly but surely. Keep climbing, ballet world. You've got our eyes on you.
Right on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, our comments and feedback are welcome, both the applause and the critiques. Until next time, dance on and stay inspired.